If you think Arizona is just sunshine, cacti, and resort getaways, you're missing an entire other half of this state. In this video, we're counting down the 10 creepiest and most remote towns in Arizona. Places with abandoned hospitals, old prisons, and a long list of real tragedies recorded in police reports. These are not exactly dream retirement destinations. These are 10 names locals either only whisper about or avoid mentioning altogether. And to ease into it, we're starting light with a restored gold mining town where people smile brightly on top of a legend about people vanishing without a trace. Number 10. Goldfield. The town sits at the foot of those dark ridges near Apache Junction, looking out over a desert that belongs on a postcard. There is a little train that circles the buildings, ice cream for the kids, staged gunfights for the parents. If you only show up at noon with sunscreen and a camera, it feels like a Western theme park someone forgot to finish. The problem is, the original movie here did not end with applause. It ended with search parties and body bags. People come for the rebuilt saloon and the mine tour, but the reason this place exists at all is a story called The Lost Dutchman Gold Mine. For more than a century, folks have quit jobs, walked away from families, and marched into the Superstition Mountains chasing a gold vein they heard about from a cousin of a friend. Many of them never came back. Rangers and rescue crews still talk about the same scene on repeat. A dry trail that seems to go on forever. Rock sharp enough to slice your boots. 45-degree heat. And way up in the white sky, a helicopter the size of a fly looking for someone who decided a rumor was worth their life. That is where the story starts to turn. Walk a little around Goldfield and the cheerful tourism paint job starts to peel. The wind comes down those mountains with a whistle that sounds too much like a voice. The wooden sign that says mine tours swings back and forth even when everything else is still. The tourist train rattles past a tiny cemetery where the names on the stones are half-eaten by sun and dust. Guides crack jokes and tell tall tales, but if you listen closely, there is a pattern. Almost every story ends the same way. Someone got rich and someone got lost. Someone went into the mountains chasing easy money and someone else had to go in with a stretcher. Locals whisper that the supers eat people. They talk about flashlights that die for no reason in the demonstration tunnels, about strange echoes that do not match the number of footsteps, about visitors who swear they saw another hiker ahead on the trail until the figure simply was not there anymore. The desert does not hate you. It just does not care whether you find your way back. The root of it is simple and ugly. Greed, desperation, and a fantasy that looks a lot like a Hollywood treasure story. Goldfield is what happens when you take a regular person, dress them up in hiking gear, and drop them into a landscape that does not care they have only ever explored the parking lot at a big box store. So here is the real question. For one picture under the sign that says Goldfield Ghost Town, would you walk a few more miles into those mountains where the radio dies and the map on your phone is just a pretty background image? We are half joking when we say this, but only half. If you ever go, tell someone exactly where you are headed and when you will be back. The desert does not have an undo button. Goldfield is the friendly face of a haunted story, dressed up and ready to sell tickets. The next town on this list also looks cheerful at first, right up until the honeymoon stories start to include guests who never checked in at the front desk. Number 9. Oatman. Oatman sounds like the name of a cartoon town. It clings to a mountain road along Old Route 66, a little strip of buildings hanging over the desert like it forgot to fall off. In the daytime, it is pure photo bait. Wild burros wander down the middle of the street, tourists crowd around with food and phones, fake gunfights pop and echo between the storefronts, and inside the bar the walls are covered in dollar bills from people who wanted to pin their moment in time to the wood. At first glance, it looks like a discount theme park version of the Old West, just rough enough to feel real but harmless. That is the daytime story. The night version is less cute. Oatman is a town that already had one foot in the grave. When the mine closed, the money dried up almost overnight. Fires tore through buildings, businesses folded, and there were years when only a handful of people stayed. stubborn enough to live among boarded windows and empty rooms. You can still feel that history if you stop smiling long enough. The laughter from the street shows fades quickly, and underneath it there is this quiet, tired heartbeat, like the town knows it was supposed to die and is not entirely sure why it is still here. In the middle of the main street sits Oatman Hotel, a two-story box of creaking wood and faded paint. Guidebooks love to tell you that Clark Gable and Carol Lombard spent a honeymoon night there, and that detail makes people grin and take pictures of the door. What they do not print as big is what modern guests talk about. People lying awake, hearing footsteps on the stairs when they know they are the only ones checked in. A man and woman arguing in low voices in the next room, even though the next room is empty. The hallway floor complains under every step. The ceiling fans turn like they are pushing through mud, and the smell of old beer and cigarettes is soaked so deep into the walls, it feels like you are breathing someone else's memories. Some visitors joke that the beds creak more than the guests. Others say it with a straight face. Step outside after dark and the charming filter drops another notch. The road that brought you in is narrow, with rock on one side and a fall on the other, and the cell signal fades in and out like it is not sure it wants to help you. Once the last show ends, headlights become rare. A few yellow porch bulbs flicker on, the burros bray somewhere out in the dark, and the wind pushes on the metal signs until they rattle and whine. The whole place sits in a strange middle ground, not fully alive, not fully abandoned, and your brain keeps asking a quiet question it cannot quite form. Am I really supposed to be here right now? The truth is that Oatman survives on nostalgia and curiosity more than on solid services. It is a town held together by old stories, souvenir money on the walls, and a lot of hope that tomorrow will bring another busload of people. It is like putting thick vintage makeup on a soul that is already exhausted and telling it to smile one more time for the camera. So here is your choice. Is one night in a hotel where the bed complains louder than you do really worth it, just so you can brag that you slept under the same roof as a Hollywood legend and a few guests who never checked out? If that sentence makes the back of your neck itch, good. Because if you think this place is creepy, number 8 is even more polite and artsy. And that is exactly what makes it dangerous in a different way. Number 8, Bisbee from the outside. This place looks like it was designed to win Instagram. The town spills down a steep canyon near the Mexico border, all narrow streets, colorful houses, and staircases that feel stolen from some European hill village. People come here for art galleries, good coffee, and street murals, and they leave with photos that say charming desert escape. The camera loves Bisbee, it just does not show everything. Take a step back from the latte foam and the live music, and the ground here starts to feel heavier. In 1917, this pretty little town staged one of the most brutal labor crackdowns in the Southwest. The Bisbee deportation sounds almost polite until you picture it. Armed men rounding up striking copper miners at gunpoint. Families watching from doorways as husbands, brothers, fathers are herded through the streets to the railroad yard. Men shoved onto boxcars with no windows and shipped out into the New Mexico desert, dumped with no food, no water, no way back. That is not a ghost story. That is company policy turned into a nightmare, and the tracks that carried those trains still cut through the hills around Bisbee. You can stand there on a quiet afternoon and imagine how loud it used to be. Then there is Copper Queen Hotel, the grand old building that sits like a queen above the town. On paper, it is all polished wood, vintage charm, and a lobby that makes you want to order a cocktail and stay a while. Off the record, it is known for a few guests who check out on paper but never really leave. People talk about Julia, the working girl who is said to have taken her own life and still wanders the halls in a blue dress. They talk about a little boy who drowned and now plays in the corridors, giggling and moving objects just enough to make you question your sanity. They talk about a well-dressed man in an old suit who smells like cigar smoke even when no one in the building has lit anything all day. One room is warm, the next has a sudden pocket of cold air right at the foot of the bed. You pour a drink, you sit down, and you get the uncomfortable feeling that the chair was already taken. The strangest part is how casual the locals are about it. Ask around and you will hear things like, "Oh, that room, yeah, people hear footsteps there all the time, no big deal." Or sometimes the elevator stops on a floor nobody pressed, just ignore it. Bisbee lives with its ghosts the way other towns live with noisy neighbors. After a while, people stop complaining and just turn up the television. Underneath all the murals and music, this is still a mining town built on extraction and pressure. For decades, you had hard labor on one side, corporate power on the other, and a whole lot of fear and anger with nowhere to go. Bisbee today feels like a vintage painting hung on a wall where the plaster has not fully dried. It looks perfect until you get close enough to see the cracks starting to bleed through. So here is the uncomfortable thought. Would you sit down with a cocktail in the Copper Queen bar, knowing there is a decent chance you are not the only one using that chair tonight? Maybe that is a part of the thrill, because this is still just ghosts in a hotel. Number 7 is where the violence never even bothered to hide itself. It is still on the walls, in every bullet hole. Number 7, Tombstone. On the surface, it could not look more friendly. Southern Arizona sun, the main street full of souvenir shops, staged gunfights for the crowd, tourists grinning in cowboy hats while someone falls dramatically into the dust. Guides call Birdcage a fun historical theater, a glimpse of the Wild West that feels safe enough for a school trip. What they rarely say out loud is that the wall behind your selfie is the same wall where people used to shoot each other until everyone got bored or ran out of ammunition. Step inside and the light changes. Everything turns a little more yellow, a little more tired. The wooden floor does not just creak, it complains. You look up and see them. Bullet holes, in the ceiling, in the walls, in places no one would aim on purpose. More than 100 spots where someone pulled a trigger in anger or panic or pure stupidity. The stories say at least 26 people died here, and the building feels like it remembers every one of them. You can almost hear the clink of glass and poker chips under the recorded tour voice, like the room is replaying a night it never finished. Birdcage was not just a theater, it was a saloon, a gambling hall, and a brothel stacked on top of itself. Those little balcony boxes that look cute in photos were once where women watched the action and negotiated prices while men threw away wages at the tables. Imagine that mix. A drunk cowboy on a losing streak, a miner who has not seen daylight in days, a working girl who knows too much, none of them armed with patience. This is where the energy starts to feel wrong. Some chairs look like they are still waiting for the regular who never came back. That corner of the bar feels like someone just left in the middle of a sentence. The strangest thing is how alive it still sounds when there is nobody there. Visitors talk about hearing laughter from the balcony even when the upstairs is empty, a scrap of piano music with no musician to blame, murmurs of a conversation that always seems to be happening just behind your shoulder. Staff tell the same story with a shrug. Cigarette smoke smell in a smoke-free building. A hand on the back of your neck when no one is close enough to touch you. It is like a bar that is officially closed for the night but somehow forgot to turn the music off for the people who never left. This is what happens when you build a business where money and gunpowder share the same room and law arrives late, if at all. In Birdcage, the rules were simple. Cash on the table, cards on the felt, pistol within reach. The arguments did not end with apologies. They ended with someone hitting the floor and everyone else pretending it was just another Thursday. So ask yourself, would you really sit down with a beer under a ceiling that has watched more deadly arguments than any talk show stage on television? Your brain will say it is fine. It is just history. Your spine may disagree. And if the air in this theater already feels too thick to breathe, wait until you hear about number 6, a place where the entire building was designed to make people confess everything just to be let out. Number 6, Yuma Territorial Prison sits on a bluff above the Colorado River, looking straight across toward Mexico. These days, it is a state historic park where families wander in with bottled water and sun hats, lining up to take cute inmate photos behind the bars. It looks like just another desert attraction until you remember that for decades, this was the place you were sent when the territory wanted to break you, not fix you. Walk out to the little cemetery first. The sun hits different out there. There are 104 graves, if you trust the count, laid out under a sky that never blinks. Most of the markers are simple and flat, some only carry a number where a name should be. You see a scrap of shade from a scrubby tree, hear the buzz of insects, maybe the faint sound of traffic from the highway. It feels wrong that the world kept moving while these men and women ended here with a piece of wood and a number. People talk about disease, escape attempts, violence. The desert does not repeat their stories. It just keeps them. Back inside the walls, the regular cell blocks already feel oppressive. Narrow bunks, thick stone, bars that cut the light into thin slices. But that is not the part that gets under your skin. The guides always save one space for last. They call it the dark cell. Imagine a stone room with almost no natural light, carved partly into the ground where the heat collects and clings to the walls. The air is heavy and still, the kind that makes your lungs work harder just to pull it in. The door is solid iron with a small opening that feels more like the slot on an oven than a window. Prisoners were thrown in here for days at a time, chained, alone, listening to their own heartbeat and whatever their mind decided to invent in the dark. This is where the tour changes from fun facts to quiet. Visitors say the dark cell does not stay empty even when it should. People report the sound of chains sliding on stone when everyone is standing still. A groan from the back corner, so low you feel it more than hear it. A shadow that seems to slide along the wall and stop just at the edge of your vision. Some swear they felt someone step in close behind them as they faced the door, a breath or a presence right at their neck, only to turn around and find nothing but black. Others talk about standing in the regular cell block and seeing a figure move past the bars in the next row, except the next row is closed for restoration. You can tell yourself it is the wind or the pipes or your imagination. The building does not bother to explain. The cruel thing about this place is that the punishment was built into the landscape. You had the walls, the bars, and the guards, but you also had the river as a barrier, the desert as a fence, the sun as an extra layer of discipline. This was not just a prison, it was a slow cooker for human beings, set on high and left to bubble until something inside them fell apart. So here is the challenge for anyone who thinks they like a good scare. Would you stand in that dark cell for 5 full minutes, door closed, lights off, no one talking, just to see what sounds crawl out of the silence? Or more accurately, who? You can always walk back out to the gift shop, snap a selfie by the gate, tell yourself it was just history. At least here the bars were welded in straight lines. Number 5 belongs to a town where the law once hung from a tree and mercy did not always get a seat at the table. Number 5, Vulture City. Vulture City does not look scary at first glance. It sits out near Wickenburg in the Sonoran Desert, under a sky that feels 3 sizes too big, with mountains on the horizon and that desert light everyone wants in their wedding photos. You can book a tour, pose in front of the old buildings, even say your vows here if you like that faded frontier look. It all sounds strangely romantic until someone points to a twisted tree on the hill and quietly mentions how many people stopped breathing there. The hanging tree is not tall or grand. It is an old ironwood, thick and knotted, the kind of tree that looks tired even when there is wind. The branches curve in, a way that makes it easy to imagine a rope over them. Local lore says at least 18 men were hanged here, mostly accused of stealing ore from the mine. Picture the scene without the safety railings and warning signs. Miners dragged out under the sun. No trial worth mentioning. A rope thrown over that branch. A crowd that stayed just long enough to watch the problem go away. People take pictures under that tree now, smiling in sunglasses, and they rarely look up long enough to connect the dots. Below the town sits the Glory Hole, a polite name for a section of mine collapse that swallowed men and animals alike. The ground here could give way without warning, sending carts, mules, and workers into a dark, choking mess of dust and rock. There are stories of shouts cut off mid-sentence, of lanterns that vanished as if someone had blown out the world. Even today, there are fenced-off areas where the earth does not feel trustworthy. You stand at the edge of one of those gaps and your body understands, at a level deeper than logic, that this ground has already decided who it will keep. Everywhere you walk, the air feels thick. The heat does not just sit on your skin, it crawls under it. One shoves dust along the streets and makes the old wood groan like it is still bearing weight. Empty houses lean toward the holes in the earth as if they are eavesdropping on something happening far below. A rusty bed frame with no mattress, a doorway that leads to a room with no floor. It feels less like a ghost town and more like a crime scene that never got taped off. The recipe out here was simple: gold, greed, and frontier justice that was more about convenience than fairness. Vulture City is the real-world version of the game Hangman, except nobody stands around guessing letters. They just guess who's going to die next. So be honest with yourself. Would you really crack jokes and pose happily under that tree, knowing that at least 18 people took their last look at this same patch of sky with a rope biting into their neck, all for the sake of a pretty old West look on your feed? If that thought makes something inside you go quiet, it should. Because if the old ropes of Vulture City already make your skin crawl, number 4 is worse. That is where an entire town was locked into the aftermath of not one, but 3 double murders. Number 4. Ruby looks harmless from a distance. It sits near the Mexican border, tucked between low hills and a small lake that reflects the sky like it is trying to be a screensaver. If you saw a photo without context, you might think quiet fishing spot, peaceful border village, perfect place to switch your phone off and breathe. That is the trick. Ruby is the kind of place that looks like a postcard and turns out to be a crime scene that never quite cooled. The real story sits inside a simple wooden building that used to be the town store. Between its walls, over the span of just 2 years, 6 people died in 3 separate double murders. Imagine that front door, the bell that once rang every time someone came in for flour or coffee. Now imagine the same door slammed open with someone running for cover. The counter that held canned goods and dry beans also held the bodies of store owners and clerks who had the bad luck to be working on the wrong day. Shots fired, shelves splintered, someone dropping behind the counter while the echoes bounced off the hill. It did not happen once. It happened, then it happened again, then again, until the name Ruby meant blood long before it meant ghost town on a map. The killings triggered what was, for its time, one of the largest manhunts in the Southwest. Posse groups, lawmen, local volunteers, all fanning out through the border hills, dogs on chains picking up scent, search parties scrambling up dry washes and ridges, early airplanes circling above, rattling the sky while men on the ground followed tracks in the dust. It must have felt like the entire desert was hunting a few desperate figures that knew every crease in the terrain. For a while, Ruby was the center of a story that ran in newspapers, the kind of story families read out loud and then double-checked the locks before bed. Then the noise stopped, the mine closed, the work dried up, and the people drifted away. What is left today is a ghost town in the strictest sense. A schoolhouse with desks still lined up for students who never came back. A playground with metal swings that squeak in the wind, going forward and back with no child on the seat. Houses staring down at the still surface of that little lake, windows empty, curtains long gone. It is quiet in a way that makes your ears ring. If something bad happened out here now, the nearest help is not close, and the hills would keep your secret for a long time. Ruby sits in that border strip where money once moved in cash, where guns were cheap and law was a flexible idea. It is a small cut on the map, but deep enough that people still feel it in the stories they tell. Think of Ruby as a knife mark that never healed, carved into both the land and the local memory. So picture this: someone hands Sepp permission to camp overnight inside the old town limits. No neighbors, no cell service worth mentioning, just a tent, some stars, and the creak of those swings in the dark. Would Sepp really sleep well knowing that only a few dozen meters from your sleeping bag, 6 people died over arguments about money that started out just as ordinary as the ones you hear in any store? That question tends to settle in your stomach and stay there. At least Ruby still offers a sky full of stars. Number 3 is not that generous. It is a pit stop off the highway where history and legend share the same cave, and neither one is finished with the people who walk in. Number 3. Two Guns. Two Guns sits right off the interstate, a quick exit from I-40 near Canyon Diablo that looks, at first glance, like nothing. A broken gas station, a few. Crumbling walls tagged with graffiti, a busted sign rattling in the wind. Teenagers and road trip kids love it. They climb on the roofs, take moody photos, post them with captions like abandoned vibes. It looks like a music video set that never got used. The problem is the original track for this place was not rock and roll. It was screaming. The story everyone whispers starts under your feet, in a low opening in the rock the locals once called Apache Death Cave. Picture a narrow mouth in the ground, just tall enough to crouch through, leading into a long, dark chamber. One version of the legend says a band of Apache warriors hid here after raiding a nearby settlement. Their enemies found the entrance and decided not to rush in with guns, but with fire. They lit brush at the mouth of the cave and shoved it inside until smoke poured down the tunnel. The men trapped in the dark screamed and tried to crawl past the flames. The air thinned, the fire ate the oxygen, and one by one, the voices cut off. 42 people, according to the story, died gasping where the light could not reach. Stand near that opening today and the silence feels almost too thick, like the ground itself is holding its breath. Years later, when Route 66 was king, a man named Earl Cundiff owned land here and smelled opportunity. This lonely spot became Two Guns, a roadside stop with gas, curios, a zoo, and guided tours right into the cave where all that horror supposedly happened. That alone would be enough to make the place feel off. But then the living drama began. Cundiff got into a business deal with a partner who decided that profit and paperwork were optional. The argument ended with Earl lying dead from a gunshot. The man accused of shooting him walked free in court. Up on the hill, the new buildings kept selling tickets while the blood soaked into the dirt. After that, it is like somebody flipped a curse switch. One owner after another tried to milk the legend for money. They opened attractions, built new structures, painted big signs. Fires burned them out. Deals went bad. The trading post changed hands so many times it started to feel like the desert was spitting people out. One caretaker, worn down by the isolation and the weight of it all, took his own life. Today, the whole site is a patchwork of ruins. Wind howls through Canyon Diablo, an old bridge sits rusting in the distance, and the remaining signs are cracked, shot up, or sprayed over with tags. It feels less like a town and more like an argument with the land that nobody ever really won. At its core, Two Guns is what happens when you build a theme park on top of a grave and call it entertainment. Greed, stolen stories, and borrowed suffering layered onto ground that was already heavy. You can sell hot dogs and postcards on that kind of history for a while, but the bill always comes due. So here is the dare that hangs over this exit. Knowing all that, would you really crawl into a cave people openly call death, cave with a bankrupt gas station sitting above your head and a line of dead owners behind you, just to see how far your flashlight beam will go? That question tends to stay with you longer than any selfie, because if Two Guns is a curse dangling over a gas station roof, number 2 is a whisper in a hospital hallway where people pay good money to lock themselves in for the night just to hear whatever is still talking in the dark. Number 2. Aho Aho, Phelps Dodge Hospital, now dressed up as the Copper Canyon Paranormal Research Center. From the road, it looks almost cinematic. The building sits high on a hill above the poor little town of Ajo and the scar of the old mine, like a director placed it there on purpose. There is a sign out front that talks about paranormal research and investigation tours. It sounds almost respectable. A little science, a little ghost hunting, something fun to tell your friends later. On paper, it is just another quirky attraction. In reality, it is more like an Airbnb for patients who never checked out. Before it sold ghost tours, this was the place miners came when things went very wrong. A rock fall underground, a machine that did not stop in time, lungs that had been chewing dust for years finally giving up, Picture the wards full of men still wearing traces of ore on their skin, beds lined up in narrow rooms, nurses moving fast, the smell of antiseptic fighting a losing battle with sweat and metal and fear. In the surgery rooms, bright lights and shadowed corners, the sound of saws and clamps and breath that kept hitching no matter how many times someone said, "You are going to be fine." A lot of people walked in here from the mine. Not all of them walked back out. Then the mine slowed and the town dried up. And one day the hospital simply stopped being a hospital. Paint started to peel. Moisture crept into the walls and left dark stains that looked like something leaking out from the inside. Windows cracked, then shattered, until some were just empty eye sockets staring at the desert. Medical equipment sat where staff had left it, only now it was rusting in place. A gurney with one wheel missing, a wheelchair frozen halfway down a hall, a children's room with faded murals and no children, whole floors that felt like someone turned the power off in the middle of a shift and never came back. That might have been the end of the story if someone had not realized there was money to be made in what the building still held. The lights came back on, but only in certain corridors. Paranormal teams moved in with audio recorders and cameras. They started to collect sounds and images that do not sit comfortably in a brochure. Voices captured on EVP that answer questions no one in the room asked out loud. Lights flicking in a hallway where the breakers are off. A sudden feeling of hands closing around a guest's throat in the old ward. No one visible, and yet the urge to cough is very real. Figures reported walking across doorways at the far end of the corridor, just at the edge of the flashlight beam. A bed in an empty room with its sheet neatly tucked suddenly shows the imprint of weight, like someone has just lain down. Walking through the building now, the strangest thing is how much of it still looks ready to work. The hallways are long and straight, with doors open just enough to see a sliver of what is inside. A faded painting hangs crooked near a nurse's station. An operating lamp hangs over a table wrapped in dusty plastic. Every sound echoes. Every echo sounds a little too much like a footstep that is one step behind you. This is what happens when a mining town collapses and the healthcare that once patched people up gets left behind. Someone eventually comes along and decides the only thing left to sell is the echo of all that pain. The last surgery this hospital went through was not on a patient. It was on hope. They cut it out and rented the rest by the hour. So here is the offer on the table. Would you sign up for an overnight lock inside this abandoned hospital, knowing that research here means lights off, doors closed, and waiting in the dark to hear which footsteps start up first? You can always tell yourself it is just for fun as you click the booking button. At least in this place, everyone admits they are walking into a haunted hospital. Number 1 is trickier. It advertises itself as a beautiful hilltop hotel, perfect for a weekend getaway, and only later do you realize how many of the guests never truly left. Number 1. Jerome sits on top of Cleopatra Hill like it is showing off. The streets are full of art galleries, tasting rooms, and little wine bars with fairy lights. Below all that, the view drops out over Verde Valley in a way that makes visitors pull out their phones without thinking. At the very top of the town, the Jerome Grand Hotel rises in pale concrete, with wide balconies and a restaurant that serves dinner with a $1 million sunset. It looks like the kind of place people go to heal. The detail the brochures do not shout about is simple. This building spent most of its life watching people come in and never walk back out. Before it sold rooms, it sold survival chances. When Jerome was a roaring copper town, this hilltop was the main hospital. Ambulances and mine trucks crawled up the road with men who had taken a bad fall underground, lungs full of dust, limbs crushed by machines that did not care who stood in the wrong place. Inside, gurneys rattled along the corridors, elevator doors slammed, operating room lamps burned hot over tables, stained by more than disinfectant. Over the decades, thousands of patients died here. Some say as many as 9,000 in total. That is enough to give every room, every stairwell, and every length of hallway its own private collection of last breaths. One story refuses to lie down. Claude Harvey, a maintenance man, was found at the base of the elevator shaft with his neck broken. Officially, it was an accident. Unofficially, people still argue about how you end up under an elevator in a way that does not quite make sense. The file is vague, the details do not line up. What does line up is the way guests and staff talk about that same elevator today. Doors that open on their own, the car stopping at a floor nobody asked for, the feeling that someone else is riding with you even when the mirrored walls show only your reflection. Then the mind slowed, the town emptied, and eventually the hospital became a hotel. Fresh paint went over old plaster, medical floors turned into suites. The morgue became a story people tell over dessert. Death did not stop just because the front desk started taking credit cards. Guests have had heart attacks in their rooms. There are stories of balcony accidents, of people who came up the hill for romance and never drove back down. Ask around and you will hear the familiar phrases. Someone sat at the edge of the bed. Someone pushed the bathroom door. Someone rolled a metal cart down the hall at 3 in the morning in a building where there are no more nurses on night shift. Walking the corridors at night, you notice how long they are and how the old elevator hums in its shaft like something breathing. The wind squeezes through the window frames and makes a thin whining sound. Floorboards pop in rooms that are supposed to be empty. Each door has a number and a key card reader, but the building still feels like it is waiting for the next ambulance to pull in. Jerome itself was built over a mine that once smoldered and shifted under the town. On top of that, someone decided to turn a working hospital into a holiday destination. The result is strange. It is like taking a mortuary, adding a spa menu, then hanging paintings and pouring wine until people forget what the building originally did for a living. So picture this. It is 3 in the morning, the hallway outside your room is dark, and you hear the rattle of a metal cart rolling past your door, even though housekeeping went home hours ago. Do you open the door to check or pull the covers over your head and pretend you came here only for the view and the wine? Either way, the hill is still there when the sun comes up. Whether you believe any of this or not, towns like Jerome do not care. They just sit in the dark, waiting for a few more curious visitors to climb the hill and test the stories for themselves. Not every pretty little town is hiding a happy story. Some of them are just really good at painting over disaster, greed, and a long list of terrible human decisions. From cursed gas stations to hospitals turned boutique hotels, Arizona is full of places where the view is gorgeous and the history is the part nobody wants to talk about at the wine bar. The map looks different once you know where the bodies, the bad choices, and the ghost stories are buried. So now it is your turn. Out of these 10 names, which one actually made your skin crawl the most, the E, place you would never set foot in, or secretly the one you would book a ticket to just to see if the stories are real? If this list made you look at Arizona a little differently, hit like, subscribe, and tell me which state you want me to dig into next.